Let us explore whether the purpose of meditation is mind control. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit, which begins, should I focus on my mind locking up? Some interesting things have happened in my past meditation sessions, but I'm unsure what to do with them. First thing that I've noticed is that when I'm meditating with the counting breaths technique, I can feel parts of my brain kind of lock up. So this is very, very important. Let's explore this from the point of view of neuroscience. Well, actually, we'll come back to that. It feels good to focus on it and try to keep the lock in effect. I imagine it as intentionally trying to stop all neuron activity. And I can, in good meditation sessions, keep that lock in place for a long time. When I first discovered this, I felt the stopped neuron activity go like a band around my temples, up, and then as I focus, I could increase it to the top of my head. Should I focus on this sensation? Or is it a distraction? Could it be like flashing lights, but more tactile in nature, and thus be a distraction to my development? Furthermore, after doing this for a few sessions, I felt what I can only describe as the lights going off in my head. And I experienced a very calming darkness that was darker than I've ever experienced before. My goal in meditation is to have full control over myself, be able to do what my rational mind wants, and be at peace with other parts of me, and understand my various motivations empathetically. I want to get as close to enlightenment as I can, and was hoping some of the more experienced users of this sub could help me. I've been meditating on and off for years. But in the past 2 months, I've done mostly daily meditations. All right, well, let's begin with broad brushstrokes. The experience, so what is the root behind the experience? I should say the confusion that you are experiencing. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, and not in the fun and tingly way. And of course that includes authors of meditation manuals and meditation teachers. That is why you are confused. There is a lot of misinformation. So and the easiest way to cut through it is by viewing meditation through the lens of neuroscience. We talked about 90% of humanity, 90% of everything sucks. And whether you read the Tao Te Ching or whether you read Buddhist lore, This 90% of humanity can be described as being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. Let us focus on being the rigidity and controlling tendencies. Now let us contrast this with the minority, whether you call them yin or whether you call them those who follow in Gautama's footsteps, who would eventually be known as the Buddha. Those who treasure being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. For the sake of our discussion, let's focus on being flexible and laid back, the opposite of being rigid and controlling. This is going to, now let's bring these observations, this contrast, into the world of neuroscience. Consider, if you will, this artist's depiction of a rather simplified cross-section of the human brain. There are a majority of teachers who insist that if we are to make progress on the path, we must practice active concentration and active analysis. The only way to perform these functions is to utilize discrete mechanisms within our brain, such as the medial prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is a delightful set of tools. Man, if you want to organize or sort or calculate or edit, this is the tool for you. But ask any fitness trainer and they'll tell you, they don't care how strong your muscle is. If you overuse it, you will experience the law of diminishing returns. And if you persist in overtraining it, overusing it, you will injure yourself. The same is true with the various facets of our central nervous system. When we overuse our prefrontal cortex, fMRI studies, functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, show that this lumpy thing seems to light up. Known as the amygdala, it functions as the seat of both anxiety and aggression. If we ignore these symptoms and persist in abusing our prefrontal cortex, we could present with symptoms of depression. And let's face it, no one says, I'm feeling a real lack of terror, rage, and despair in my life. I think I'll concentrate and analyze some more. No. These same teachers are so rigid that when they get bad results or their students get bad results, they will either say, well, you just need to try harder, or they'll say that's because we're living in the time of the Kali Yuga where the teachings no longer work. Never once considering that maybe they've misunderstood the teachings, which is a tragedy in and of itself. Just as our inner ears have tubes that ensure that we can effortlessly sit upright and stand upright and walk upright, likewise, our central nervous system has mechanisms to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. The Buddha taught an eightfold path. In fact, that what if enlightenment was nothing mystical, but simply the mastery of the Buddha's eightfold path. As a child, I had difficulty learning to tie my shoes, but through persistence and tears and angry parents, eventually I learned how to tie my shoes. And I got so good at tying my shoes that I could do so spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Those are the hallmarks of mastery, whether it's mastering tying your shoes, brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth, riding your bike, or writing in cursive. Those are the hallmarks of mastery. Once we are so good at practicing the Eightfold Path that we do so spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. That is the enlightenment that the Buddha offered. According to the Buddha, it is possible to master his path in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. If someone tells you it can't be done in this lifetime or the next 100,000 lifetimes, thank them for their time, and then run away, because this person is confused. This was taught in the second to final passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha's meditation manual. Or I should say, one of the meditation discourses the Buddha gave. If your teacher isn't excited about helping you master this easily, sustainably, and quickly, then find one who is. One of the great ironies is that when we practice mindfulness and meditation correctly, which are the 7th and 8th folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, when we practice them correctly, they spontaneously and effortlessly generate the remaining 6 folds, which is quite efficient. So let us turn our attention to mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we're wired to access our sympathetic nervous system effortlessly. This sympathetic nervous system is found in the center third of our spinal cord. And it functions not only to help us perceive, but to help us to do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. But there is a dark side to mindfulness. We can notice all manner of things: sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. Emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. All manner of things. From the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now that can feel daunting. Fortunately, there's also meditation, the 8th fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired to access our parasympathetic nervous system. Like bookends, they are found in both the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. And they have evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Now, there's some amazing fringe benefits to this. Remember we talked about how overuse the prefrontal cortex can cause our amygdala to light up? By the way, here's something I've noticed. In the traditions that emphasize active concentration and active analysis, they also emphasize the active cultivation of empathy and compassion and love. Why do they do that? Because they're causing their amygdala to light up. They're causing their aggression and anxiety to light up. These people also emphasize, developing faith, because they hope it will be a counterpart to the anxiety that comes from stimulating their amygdala. But here's the great irony. Practice mindfulness and meditation, and peace takes care of itself. Practice mindfulness and meditation, and the amygdala not only calms down, but this thing lights up. This thing that looks like a baseball mitt. This thing that the big kids call the anterior cingulate gyrus. This thing that functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. Did you know that 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness? That the second, third, fourth, and fifth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to empathetic intention, empathetic communication, empathetic behavior, empathetic commerce. Or in other words, instead of being a Chad or a Karen forever trying to get someone fired or drive someone out of business, instead be defined by cooperation and kindness. Those flow effortlessly from our training in mindfulness and meditation. Furthermore, one only has to glance at a cursory fashion at the Tao Te Ching to recognize the similarity. This is the Tao Te Ching teaches of the flow state. The sixth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is the right effort of effortless effort. How does that work? The highest love is not contrived. It is spontaneous and uncontrived. And when its influence is felt upon our choices and utterances and deeds, they experience the effortless effort of centered spontaneity. No, not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. This is the magic that makes our life work. This mindfulness and meditation are the dynamo, the drive, the love and the flow state and the resilience and the creativity and the empathy that we desire. The first fold of the Eightfold Path is right view of reality, or in other words, impermanence. One requires not a PhD or a 3-year retreat to recognize there's change. In fact, due to the workings of mindfulness, we can't escape it. We see change all the time. We see that what we see changes, what we hear changes, what we feel changes, what we taste changes, what we smell changes, and the like. We see that what we emote and what we intend and what we think changes. What we recall different things from moment to moment. We imagine different things from moment to moment. We see that all that we perceive is a 3-ring circus of change at different velocities and often interfering with each other, kind of like a 3-ring circus run amok. I used to think that only mammals had a prefrontal cortex. That only simians had a prefrontal cortex. I used to think that only mammals had an anterior cingulate gyrus. I used to think that reptiles were all amygdala, but I was incorrect. And I was happy to learn that all 3 divisions of complex life forms have all 3 circles of the brain. They have them in different ratios and in different quantities, but they are all there. That is why in some YouTube videos you can see that when lizards, reptiles, are raised in a safe, nurturing environment, they become affectionate, which is wild. When sitting cross-legged upon the floor, we have a choice to indulge our rigid and controlling tendencies, or to indulge our flexible and laid-back tendencies. The Buddha was not a master manifestor. He was already born a prince, with all the power, prestige, money, and pleasure he could desire. he forsook that to become a wandering yogi. If you want to spend your life manifesting, that's up to you, and I can't tell you what to do, but I can point out to you that arguably the world's most successful meditation teacher, either literally or purely archetypically, taught there's nothing finer than peace and love and joy and flow. And rather than force that, we allow that. Now, you could really ask a really insightful question. You could say, hey man, if I already have a sympathetic nervous system, if I already have a parasympathetic nervous system, and if I already appear to inhale and exhale, then why have I not cornered the market in peace and contentment? The answer is simple. In a word, Urkel. Our poor, overworked brain is like a storage area owned by a hoarder. Due to some quirks of evolution, it kind of spends its life stepping in its own dick, knocking shit over, asking, did I do that? But here's the really cool thing. Just like Urkel, our brain is clever and good-hearted. And so if we ask our brain to silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we will find that our brain cooperates with the sympathetic nervous system portion of the central nervous system more easily. Similarly, during our exhalation, if we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease, we will find that our brain cooperates more easily with our parasympathetic nervous system. So just as an athlete will warm up before the big sprint, just as an engine works better with oil inside of it to lubricate the moving parts, through the simple, gentle use of the words this and ease, which only serve to align our intention with the pre-existing circuitry of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, we can become the Buddha we were born to be. I do look forward to practicing with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So I'm going to tap button 5. The second fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is empathetic intention. So let's perform a brief recitation using words to align our intention in that direction. Let us set intention by chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. Please chant with me. May all minds of all beings clear yet in permanent peace, joyfully enlightened as our Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet in permanent peace, peacefully loving as our Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet in permanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Buddha's land. As we inhale, as we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this while inhaling, we can kick back and watch the antics of our mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Let us seal this practice by chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. So we are using this. This is not prayer. We are simply using words to guide our own volition. May all minds of all being clear yet and permanent be as joyfully enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet and permanent be as peacefully loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. It even helps support this channel. In approximately 10 1/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.